My name is Zach Arnold. I'm a Hollywood film and television editor, a documentary director, father of two, an American Ninja Warrior in training, and the creator of Optimize Yourself. Whether you're a creative professional, an entrepreneur, a weekend warrior, or even a professional athlete, I strongly believe that it is no longer necessary to sacrifice your health in order to be successful. Throughout my own career, I have battled attention issues, anxiety, burnout, and back in 2005, after almost losing the battle with suicidal depression, I had had enough. I was done barely surviving. I wanted to thrive. Since then, I have obsessively searched for every possible way to optimize my own creative and athletic performance. And now I want to shorten your learning curve so you can forge your own path to greatness without sacrificing your sanity in the process. You ready? Let's get started designing the optimized version of you. Hello and welcome to episode number 70 of the Optimize Yourself podcast. If you're brand new, I welcome you and I sincerely hope that you find today's conversation inspirational. And if you're a regular listener, welcome back. Whether you're brand new or you're a seasoned vet, if you have just 10 seconds today, it would mean the world to me if you clicked the subscribe button. Because the more people subscribe to the show, the more iTunes and the other platforms recognize it, and then the more people you and I can inspire to step outside their comfort zones to reach their greatest potential. In addition to iTunes, you can also find the show on Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, TuneIn, and a whole bunch more. If you want to see our entire index of past episodes and subscribe with a single click, just visit optimizeyourself.me/podcast. Today's episode is actually part one of a two-part case study that's going to dive deep into the question that plagues so many that are trying to land their dream job in scripted entertainment. To assist or not to assist? That is the question. Now, in part one, I explored the assistant route, and then in part two of this case study, I explore the editing route. So after you're done listening to this episode, I highly encourage you to continue listening into part two so you can then hear both opposing sides of this discussion. In part one of this case study, I chat with Chris Cavanagh, who's a television and film editor who specializes in long-form unscripted storytelling. He has worked on numerous shows in the docuseries, true crime, and the reality spaces, and 2 years ago he moved from New York City to Los Angeles to make the terrifying transition from unscripted to scripted. Now, despite having an extensive resume of popular shows for a bunch of top networks, Chris found it incredibly difficult to make the transition from unscripted to scripted because most people in Hollywood unfairly believe that people who do unscripted, they just can't do scripted. Oh, don't get me started. After working with Chris for 12 weeks in my one-on-one career coaching and mentorship program, Chris has now officially made the transition into scripted work. He even landed the gig as my assistant editor on Cobra Kai, and he's now moving onto one of the editorial teams for the show Star Trek Discovery. Listen, there is no set path that we can follow to success in the Hollywood entertainment industry. But it is possible to design your own unique path if you know the right questions to ask and the right steps to follow. My purpose for sharing this case study with you is to demonstrate how Chris designed his own path so you can then apply what you learned in this interview to your own journey. And if after listening to this, you do want to learn more and apply to work with me for the next several months and beyond, enrollment is currently open in my career coaching and mentorship program, but time slots are extremely limited and applications are only going to be accepted through Friday, May 10th. So if you would like to work with me one-on-one to land your dream job, all you have to do is visit optimizeyourself.me/elite. That's ELITE. All right, without further ado, after a brief break to recognize the sponsor of this episode, my case study with editor Chris Cavanagh. To access the show notes for this episode, please visit optimizeyourself.me/episode 70. This episode is made possible for you by ErgoDriven, the makers of the Topo Mat, my number one recommendation for anybody who stands at their workstation. The Topo is super comfortable, an awesome conversation starter, and it's also scientifically proven to help you move more throughout the day, which helps reduce discomfort and also increase your focus and productivity. To learn more and get your Topo Mat, visit optimizeyourself.me/topo. That's TOPO. I'm here today with Chris Cavanagh, who's a film and television editor, also currently an assistant editor working in scripted, and as a side note, was my assistant editor on Cobra Kai season 2. So Chris, it is a pleasure to finally get this conversation on the record. So thanks for coming in so early in the morning today, especially since you have kids. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. And as somebody who's listened to a lot of your podcasts, it's mind-bending to be on the other side of one. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, you definitely earned it and then some. That is not an understatement. You definitely earned your way onto the podcast. And that's partly what I want to talk about today. But what I really want to talk about, and our conversation may veer in several different directions, but you and I work together in both the introductory coaching program that I do the first 12 weeks, and you're now in my advanced networking group where there's a group of people in the post-production industry, and we're all working together to advance your goals, whether it's you want to work in scripted as an editor or you want to work in features, whatever it is. We're all working specifically to build the right connections, build the right relationships. So that's actually where I want to start, because I think it's really important for people to understand how you and I got connected in the first place, because it's kind of a little mini clinic on how to network with people. So how did we actually get to know each other in the first place?
Yeah, so we met on one of your Fitness and Post hikes in Griffith Park. And we went up the mountain and down the mountain and, met some other people. And it was the day that I met Natalie Beauchamp, your former assistant, who's now an editor, who was helping you out. And that for me was all about getting to know more people here in Los Angeles. I moved to LA about 3 years ago from New York and made a big transition in life in general coming out here. And so that was how we met. It was about me trying to meet more people.
Yeah. And the point that I want to make here is that you weren't saying to yourself, I need to go find an editor at a networking event and I need to hand him my business card and my resume and my demo reel on a website and say, I would love to be considered for future opportunities. You said, hey, this guy's doing a hike. So I'm going to go outside and I'm going to say hello. And I remember you being at 2 or 3 of those hikes, and I vaguely remember it now because it was a while ago, but you just kind of kept showing up and you were friendly and you asked some questions and we got to know each other a little bit, but it wasn't like you were hiking next to me and really trying to push yourself for an opportunity or talk about all of your accolades or say, hey, look at me, I'm so great, you should pay attention to me. It was just about genuinely being a real person and us connecting as people. And it took a little while, but obviously it got you to an area of the industry where you eventually wanted to get. So I think that even though we're going to be talking a lot about this transition that you've been making from being an editor in reality and in docuseries, and I want you to talk about that a little bit, the idea is that you're trying to figure out, or you were at the time when we were working the coaching program, one of the main things that we were focused on was transitioning from where you were to getting into the world of scripted and how we can design the path to make that happen. And the question that so many people have when they get to the stage in your career where you are at, and again, you can expand upon where you started and what your career path was. So many people will say, well, at your age or at your level of experience, you can't be an assistant. That's just the worst way to do it. And you're going to look bad and it's never going to work for you. You have to be an editor. And then other people say, well, you can't make a transition into scripted and just be an editor right away. You have to be an assistant. Everybody thinks they have the right answer. And guess what? Nobody has the right answer because everybody's path is unique. And that's what you and I worked on for so long, is trying to figure out what is the path going to look like for you, because your definition of success is different than somebody else's. The life that you're living is different than somebody else's. Your personal needs, your needs for your family, for everything else, that's going to be different than somebody else. And we spent a lot of time deliberating that. So I want to get to that point, but first, can you give us a little bit of background of what your life looked like professionally when you and I first found each other?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think I'm uniquely qualified to speak to that because I've seen the issue from both sides. I have seen it as I can't take a step back. I have seen it from a point of it's not going to work for me financially. And then I've eventually come around and say, well, this is actually the only way that I see it working. And so I do feel like I've gone through a complete evolution in that sense. So I can see it from all sides. So when we met where I was professionally, again, I had just moved from New York. I think maybe it was 6 months later. I can't really remember. But I had been cutting television documentaries and a little bit of reality for, I would say, a good 8-9 years, something like that. And that was all going great. Before that, I was working in scripted. I had assisted on a couple of films. I had cut my own feature, and that had a couple of names in it, and how I went from working in scripted to then taking a big detour into reality and unscripted is sort of a major turning point in my life, where I was very happy working in scripted, but it became something that I couldn't sustain financially anymore. I couldn't live on the $100 a day that I was getting paid in New York to work on scripted stuff. And at that moment where I made the transition, another big life event happened. Someone very close to me came down with a life-threatening disease. And that is not something I dwell on, but it's something that really affected me in a way that I said, okay, look, like I have to have health insurance. I can't live on this $100 a day. I can't live on this pretend health insurance. And so friends of mine at the time were making TV documentaries and making livable wages. And they said, hey, come on over here. And, we're doing this. And it's still storytelling and documentary. And I love storytelling and I love documentary. I love storytelling is why I'm an editor. And around the same time, I met the person that I wanted to marry. I'm very fortunate that I met the person who is the person for me. And she wanted to go to law school. And so I helped out with supporting us while she went to law school, and we got married and we had 2 kids. And then cut to 10 years later, here I am getting back to what I really want to do. So financial considerations have always been part of the equation for me.
Well, and somehow you obviously found a way to make it work, because I remember one of the very, very early conversations that we have, and I was just going back through my old session notes, and my Lord, I didn't realize how long ago it was that you and I started working together, but it was August of 2017.
Yeah.
So it's been like a year and a half since you and I started, and you were in my very, very first beta round before I even knew what I was doing. And to be honest, I'm still not sure I know what the hell I'm doing. I always feel like I'm winging it. So for anybody listening that's like, oh, I have imposter syndrome, it's like, well, me too. Because I feel the same way, where it's like, really? I'm doing this thing? But anyway, the point is that we started in August of 2017. You were one of the very, very first beta members. I think you were actually maybe member number 2 that signed up. And I remember there was a lot of hesitation and fear, where at that time you didn't come to me saying, I am confidently sure that my path includes me becoming an assistant editor on scripted television. We spent a lot of time deliberating, is that the right choice or is that the wrong choice? And like I said in the beginning, there isn't a right answer. There's just the right answer for you. So let's kind of do a flashback, so to speak, rewind the clock to August of 2017. And I know that might not be the easiest thing to do because so much has changed since then. But come to me with all of the fears that you had about whether or not you should make this transition to assisting, or if you should try to break through the wall and just become an editor and scripted right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew I wanted to be in scripted. I knew that I wanted to work on the kind of content that I connect with, that I really enjoy. So the passion was always there, the desire was always there. But as we know, in this industry, there's just not a set path. And so I was trying to figure out how to do that. And we went through the entire process that we went through, working on things, refining my website, working on outreach, working on networking. Even when we finished that program, I still was not ready to say, okay, I'm ready to take a step back to be an assistant. The roadblocks that were in my way were financial, which was legitimate, still is legitimate. I had to figure out a way to rearrange everything in my life and make some sacrifices to be able to live on a lot less money. And then there was absolutely a pride factor as well, where I would say, I fought very hard back in New York to rise out of the in-house editor, assistant editor position that I was at a production company, and to go freelance and to become an editor. And all of that push and all of that drive and saying no to things and really pursuing that chair was really healthy for me in a way, and allowed me to establish myself in the beginning of my career in that sense. But at the same time, some of that rigidity closed me off to other paths that might help me get there faster, that might help me get to the place that I wanted to be in a better way. So it's interesting how the desire and the drive can be, there's 2 sides to that coin.
The one that I really want to pull out here is the word pride. Because when it comes to the financial part of it, this is very legitimate for a lot of people. If you're 24 years old and you've got a 1-bedroom apartment and maybe you have a small car payment, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, like, my God, take whatever work fulfills you. It doesn't matter if it pays you $1,000 a day or $100 a day. Do work that's going to help you build your resume, that builds your network of connections. Like, just go out there and make the choices that are going to take you down the path you want to get to have a creatively fulfilling career. When you're at the age that you and I are, and you're on the other side of 40 and I'm creeping up on 40 in a few months, so we're not spring chickens anymore and we have houses and we have kids, it's much harder to say, I'm going to pursue my dreams, because then you look at your bank account and then your wife looks at your bank account and you're like, no, not going to happen. I'm in that position right now where I've had to very reluctantly turn down several very high profile scripted TV opportunities because I want to pursue my next dream and what I believe to be the next phase of my life, which is show running and directing documentaries and documentary series. So I have to make sacrifices to make that happen. So it's not like I kind of remember what it was like being in this position 15 years ago. I feel this right now. I know this pain. So the financial part is very real. But the part that nobody wants to talk about, or that very few want to talk about, is the pride part. And that comes from our culture of people saying, well, once you're an editor, you can't go back because then people are just going to look at you the wrong way and they're going to think less of you and they're going to disrespect you because you took that step backwards. So let's just, no holds barred, talk about the elephant in the room of how this affects your pride and the way that people view you in this industry, because that can sometimes be the hardest hurdle to get over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so much easier for me now to see it from the other side now that I have busted through that. But there's a lot of resistance, and a lot of that resistance is based upon fear, and the fear of this will hurt my chances to succeed because of perception. And, I'm someone who has done a lot of on my own self-development work and just tried to get other people's perspectives on how to improve myself, how to keep myself healthy. And one of the most interesting things that I ever came across, I think it really applies to this situation that I'm in and that a lot of people are in. And the saying is, nobody cares. Like, nobody really cares about much more than what they have going on. So whether you are, at a bar by yourself, whether you are taking a step back as an assistant, whatever it is that you're doing, as long as you believe in it and you're passionate about it, nobody else cares. All they really see is your mood, is your positivity, is your belief in your direction. So, in terms of how you're going to be perceived, you have to ask yourself why you're doing it in the first place. And you have to ask yourself, is this the best way to get to where I want to go? And when you and I were working together, we did a lot of really good work to shape me in that direction. But when we finished after the 12-week program, I still wasn't there yet. I still needed a couple more months of perspective. And I talked to a couple of other editors, and I thought about it. And some of the people Joaquin, and then some other editors on some features. And, I finally came to the point a couple months later, I said, I just have to give this a try because I don't see a different way forward for myself. So why not give it a shot? And some bigger name people that I had talked to, I needed, I had your perspective, and I also needed additional perspective. And, some people just said, just go ahead, just do it, just try it. Like, I know people who've done it at this age, older than you, and it worked out for them great. And just give it a shot. What do you have to lose? And then I finally came back to you and I said, you know what? I said, I'm ready to give this a try. And first I talked to my wife and just said, hey, this is what this will mean financially. And it took us a couple of weeks to really work on the mechanics of that and, what that was going to mean on a week-to-week basis and a month-to-month basis. When you're talking about editors specifically, the great thing about editors is most editors that you are going to meet are supporting themselves. When it comes to writers and producers, it's a little bit more vague in terms of, are they completely supporting themselves, so on and so forth. A lot of them are. A lot of them have pulled themselves up from way less than I ever had. But when you meet an editor, you're meeting someone who is supporting themselves for the most part. That's what I have found every time. And so, once we got through the mechanics of that, and I got back to you and I said, look, I'm ready to step onto this path and to see where it leads. And you said, that's great. And I'll help in any way that I can. And, it wasn't until, 6 or 7 months later that I had an opportunity for a tryout with you a little bit later. But that was sort of a roadmap of my process.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say that I'm incredibly offended that you needed other people's perspectives. I'm not sure how I feel about that because mine is the only perspective you should have ever listened to. So I just want to make that very clear. The takeaway that I want to get from here that I think is interesting is the why, right? The big moment that I felt that you had the transition was not necessarily, well, I want to do this or I want to do that, or, I've done the finances. It was the confidence. I saw the shift where I don't remember if it was a Slack message or a conversation or whatever it was, but there was always this hesitation in all 12 weeks of our sessions. And even afterwards, when you would follow up or ask a question or whatever, but then all of a sudden I could just sense it. It was, this is what I'm doing. And once you made the commitment, that's when everything changed. And I see that in my life as well. It's actually one of the parallels that I've seen with American Ninja Warrior, where it's kind of like, and I'm going to use this analogy and you'll find it funny and the audience might, but this is a Mr. Miyagi analogy. It's where, if you can train karate, yes, right side road. You can train karate, no, left side road. Train karate, okay, maybe guess so, in the middle of road, get squished like grape, right? It's all about that level of commitment. With Ninja Warrior, for a long time, it was, oh, this looks kind of cool. Maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll exercise. Maybe I'll run a Spartan race. But the day that I said, this is what I'm doing, my entire life changed. The way that I approached not just exercise and diet and sleep and everything else, but just who I was as a person changed. And I took on this identity, this outward identity that other people saw me as. You're the guy training for American Ninja Warrior. I haven't even been on the show. I haven't even achieved what I ultimately wanted to achieve, but it's completely changed my life just because I committed to it. And I could just sense that from you where that commitment came. You're like, I'm going to be an assistant editor in Scripted. There was no more hesitation. And as soon as that happened, everything started to come together for you.
Yeah. And it really was about the why. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because eventually I want to be an editor in scripted television. And that path is out there for me. And I've got to keep moving forward on that path. And as someone who has switched over to being an assistant from being an editor, I can tell you that, again, the philosophy of nobody cares absolutely holds true. People want to see people in the business, people out of the business, people in your personal life or professional life. They want to see that you are engaged, that you're positive. Nobody really cares if you are the executive producer of The Avengers if you're miserable. Nobody cares whatever you do. They just want to know that you feel like you are on your path. And that has absolutely been the case for me personally and professionally. My family is completely supportive. The people that I work with in Scripted have been completely supportive of my path. I've never felt, judgment for taking a step back to go forward. In fact, the people that I've met in Scripted have only tried to help move me forward. And that's based on, obviously, on doing a good job, on being a good listener, on doing all the things that it takes to be a good assistant. But people really will support you if you're coming from an authentic place, if you're coming from a place where you're adding value and you are contributing to the environment. In my experience, you're going to find nothing but support on the other side.
Yeah, that level of authenticity is so key, because if you're confident about the choice that you've made and the direction that you're going, then people are going to admire that, because so few other people have that confidence and that level of authenticity. And I think that one of the things about your journey and kind of your circumstance that was somewhat unique is that when you came to me originally and said, should I be an editor in Scripted or should I be an assistant editor in Scripted? It wasn't an easy answer for me. Generally, I can look at somebody's path, look at their resume, their body of experience, and say, you know what? I'm pretty confident you're going to want to go in this direction. There are other people in our group networking program where I'm like, yep, this is definitely the direction you need to go. With you, I wasn't sure about that because you had so much good experience as an editor, and it technically wasn't scripted, but you were doing narrative material that was weaved within the unscripted material. So if you had just been doing Survivor for 10 years, or you had been doing Amazing Race or something, and say, well, and again, I want to make sure I'm not making it sound like, oh, they're less of an editor. Those guys are amazing editors, and I would never want to do that kind of work because it's really involved and there's a whole lot to it. But at the same time, it's a very different language that they have to speak. So if I were just to look at somebody that had done 15 years of competition shows, I'd say it's not a one-to-one translation where I can automatically tell you'd be a great fit to edit scripted material. But with your stuff, it was close enough. I was like, I mean, you kind of could go right into editing. It's a little tougher to figure it out. It just wasn't a clear-cut answer. So that was one of the tough things that I think for some people, they're in that same place. But then for others, it's kind of obvious where there are some people that have so much editing experience that I'd say, I don't think assisting is going to make sense for you. And then there are other people that really want to go right to editing, but you look at their body of work and you're like, I just don't see it. I think you're going to have to suck it up and you're going to have to be an assistant editor for a couple of years. But with you, going back to where we started, it was this idea of you were confident about that choice. And an example would be that we had numerous conversations. I mean, we always have what I call like our little fireside chats in the morning. I always do that with my assistants where we'll sit down for 15, 20 minutes, just kind of talk about the world, figure out what is the day going to look like? What are all the demands upon us? You know, every once in a while, somebody comes in. And especially when you first started, people would say, oh, you know, hey, where'd you come from? What was your last show? And there's a couple of ways you could have gone about it. And I've seen this before, where you kind of hang your head and you look down at the floor and you say, well, you know, I did work in reality for a while and, you know, did this and that and the other thing, but, you know, now I'm on this show, right? But with you, there was just this confidence. Well, you know, I was in New York for 10 years and I worked on a lot of unscripted and docuseries work. And now I've made the decision that I want to jump into scripted and this was the best way to do it. And I was like, damn, like that's a confident answer.
And a lot of that came from our work together, frankly, in that it's really important, one thing that you helped me a lot with, to say, this is what I am, not what I am trying to be. So I did a lot of work to make sure that when I talk to people, I would say, I am transitioning to scripted. My background is XYZ, but this is what I am. This is what I'm doing. And never, I guess it's that whole karate no, karate yes, karate, you know, in the middle gets squished. It's not I'm trying. It's not I'm hoping. It's this is what I'm doing. I can describe the actual steps. Like, yes, I'm an assistant right now and I'm on the path to A, B, and C. So that's a very important mind shift set that I needed to internalize. And I feel a lot better having done that.
Yeah, that's one of the core fundamental places to start for everybody. And I had to learn this myself. And I'm still using this to this day with the transition that I'm making. I talk about this a lot more in depth in a podcast that I did with my former assistant editor, Chris Visser. So anybody listening with the first name Chris that has experience, you already have a leg up on working with me someday just by your name. But the point is, that when he first approached me, I'd never met him before, approached me at EditFest. And he said, you know, I'm interested in getting into the scripted space, but right now I'm a colorist. And I said, oh, no, we're going to stop you right there. You're a colorist that's transitioning into scripted. He's like, what do you mean? It's like, you need to make it very clear who you are and where you're going, right? So it's about dressing for the job that you want, not the job that you have. And the word that I hear all the time, I hear this in almost every one of my introductory coaching calls or the first few weeks. And I can't remember if you and I went through this specifically or not. Maybe you will remember, but I do a lot of these calls now, so they might be blurring together. But the word that I always hear is just. I'm just a reality editor. I'm just an assistant. And I get this over email all the time where people introduce themselves to me and I stop people right away. I'm like, never use the word just again, because you're selling yourself short and you're conveying a lack of confidence. Oh, I'm just an assistant. No, you're not. You're an assistant. And you might be the best assistant on the planet. So don't sell yourself short. And I think that once you made it, because I remember you and I doing some like mock networking, like live networking, because that was definitely one of your areas of weakness, which frankly is everybody's area of weakness in our industry because we're all introverts. And that's why we choose to work in dark rooms by ourselves. But we had done kind of this mock networking thing. And I remember like approaching you, so to speak, and just kind of asking you who you are and like, hey, what do you do? And the first couple of times it was like, well, you know, I'm a reality editor, kind of been doing docuseries, and you know, I've just been working on this for a while, and I'm hoping that I can you know, find a way into. Well, I guess it would be maybe scripted. I was like, stop! Oh my god, no, start over. Like, so do you remember that whole process?
Oh, absolutely, and it is painful. It is unfortunately, you know, it's a bit like dating, and it is awkward, and you know, confidence is going to carry the day. And if you can't summon the confidence, it's going to be harder and harder to make connections.
Yeah, and the confidence is the absolute key. I mean, what you and I were working through, and you were in a much earlier, rougher version. But we essentially work through the Focus Yourself program step by step by step. The first part of that, it's a 3-unit program. The first unit is clarity, which you and I worked on. What is the actual goal? Why is it important to you? What are the obstacles in the way? But then the next step, which is the biggest one, is confidence. If you don't have the confidence knowing, number one, that what you're working towards is the right thing, you're not going to be able to make it happen. But number two, you need to be confident that the next action you're taking or the next project you're completing moves you forwards. Because there's nothing more demoralizing than working your ass off for 80 hours a week and on Friday night looking back and saying, did I do anything? Like, am I in anywhere different spot than I was last Friday night? Like, what was the point of that? So the important thing is really designing what does that path look like for you based on all of the clarity that we created to know that, oh, when I do this thing on Thursday morning, it's probably going to suck and I don't want to do it. But when I'm done with it, I'm going to say, yep, I'm one step closer to where I want.
Yeah, and it takes practice. It absolutely takes practice. Nothing is going to come easy. You're never going to walk in one door and out another and be fully formed. It's hard work. There are no shortcuts, but you can actually, improve on things. You can change things. You can take some of your, abilities and you can amplify them. You can take things that you think are disabilities and turn them into advantages. But it's always work worth doing to practice reaching out to people, to practice making connections, and again, connecting on an authentic level. That can be difficult. It's very difficult to connect authentically and positively when you lack confidence.
Yeah, confidence is the secret sauce to everything. And it's not confidence that looks like arrogance. It's not, I'm really good at what I do and you need to know me. It's just this assurance that you're on the right path. And this is the networking event that I need to be at, or this is the scene that I need to be editing, or this is the job that I need to be doing. Even if I'm an assistant, I see the bigger picture. I see the vision. The vision is me in the chair editing a high profile scripted series. But that's not today. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that today I'm in a chair. I'm the assistant editor on Cobra Kai, but I'm still moving forwards and it's getting me closer to the path. And I have found that when you have that confidence and you have that clarity about where you're going, you're so much less stressed at work. I mean, there's still the BS about deadlines and people's expectations and politics and everything else. But that larger underlying anxiety and stress just goes away because you feel like, yep, this is what I need to be doing right now.
And it's the confidence to hang back a little bit too. It's when you have that confidence, you don't feel like you need to tell that person or the person that you're working with or the person that you're just meeting everything about yourself, everywhere you're hoping to go, all of your, past, what isn't working for you. You can just get to know someone. And I think that's been really helpful for me, is that every interaction that I go into, every new person that I work with, I'm trying to get to know a person first, before, I hear about what movie they're working on or what show they're working on. It really is about getting to know the person, getting a lot of commonalities out there, and enjoying yourself and sharing a laugh, sharing, other things before it really gets into, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm trying to do, what's working for me, what's not working for me. I mean, it's all of this. This is very much this is a people profession. And the more you can improve your people skills, the better you will be.
People skills in post-production? What are you, crazy? We don't have people skills. I couldn't have said it better. And I think that's great. And if I could to kind of, not a tangent, but just kind of as an aside, if this were a book, this would be one of those little gray shaded areas with extra bonus tip. Anybody that's going to networking events, what's the first question going to be? Their first question is always, what are you working on right now? I dare you to go to a networking event next time and do not allow yourself to ask that question. You need to find more creative ways to build relationships with people beyond wanting to know what they're working on, because that's the crutch. The crutch is, hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, what are you working on right now? What if instead you actually showed interest in them as a human being?
There's a book that you turned me on to called Give and Take by Adam Grant. Is it Adam Grant? Am I saying that right?
I think so, but I actually think you turned me on to that.
Oh, did I?
I remember correctly, maybe. But yeah, go ahead.
So many you've turned me on to. So that I can't recommend that book highly enough in terms of understanding the dynamic between, there are people who take, there are people who give, and then there's that in-between category, which is called matchers, I think. As it turns out, the people who give of their time, who give of their emotional energy, who give of their resources, always end up doing better in the long game. And Adam Grant, a PhD, can say it a lot better than I can, but it's a way that feels good to connect with people. And it's actually a very successful way to get where you want to go. So, giving of your time, asking questions, finding out about what the other person, who the other person is before you trying to find out, what they do and how they can help you is really the only way to move forward, I think, in this business, because this business in particular is full of really smart, hardworking people. And people can smell immediately when you are coming on to them and trying to get something. I think that people don't necessarily go into interactions trying to get something, but they don't know what else to talk about. So it becomes very transactional in a sense. People start like, oh, hey, here's my card. This is what I'm working on. If you hear of anything, let me know and I'll let you know. And I mean, those types of interactions never produce lasting connections. And certainly in both sides of the business, in scripted and in unscripted that I've worked in, it's only those lasting connections. It's only when you work with someone, when you meet someone that you genuinely like, that relationship is likely to continue in a good way. And I think that anybody listening can think back on their own experiences and see that is true about 99% of the time.
Yeah, if this had been a video podcast, you would have seen me physically cringe as you were describing the person that was handing out their business card and saying, I would love to be considered. Whether that's in-person networking, whether that's somebody sending an email with a resume attached and you never talked to them before, please just stop doing that. Build relationships with people, play the long game and be willing to be patient, because that's where the money is. And I don't say money is in the physical money, like that's the money spot. That is the sweet spot. You build these relationships over time, and it's like planting seeds. I grew up on a farm, so I like farming analogies. So forgive me in advance, but you plant the seeds in the spring. It's not like you walk out the next day and you start to see stuff. You wait months. You have nothing there. It's a field of dirt, and it's a field of dirt, and it's a field of dirt. And then all of a sudden you wake up 3-4 months later and you're like, oh my God, there's a foot of grass out there, or there's a foot of hay, or there's a foot of corn, or whatever it is. And then a month later, it's 8 feet high. It goes like crazy, but the curve is not linear. And it works the same way when you're building relationships. You have to plant a lot of seeds, and for a while they might not germinate, but then all of a sudden, all of it starts to take over, and you're in this position of, oh my God, I'm getting 3 job offers this week. What do I do? Right? But it takes a while to get there. And that's kind of where I want to transition now, is I want to talk a little bit deeper about networking and the work that we have done in our advanced group, because this is a whole nother level and this is brand new to me. So once again, you're one of my guinea pigs in another alpha experiment, but I feel like it's gone incredibly well. When I walked into it, and I even told everybody that was in it, I said, I have no idea how this is going to work. I don't know if it's going to work at all, if it's going to be worth your time or your money, but let's figure it out. And I feel like, I think it's been like 13 or 14 weeks, and now it's just going like gangbusters. So what I would love is, from your perspective, rather than me trying to explain it and trying to sell it, because that's not what I'm trying to do, talk about from your perspective the value that you're seeing in this. You've graduated, so to speak. You're out in the real world and you're figuring all this out, flapping your own wings, so to speak. So I just want to talk about what that process has been like, and also what some of the things are that you've gotten out of this group program now that we're working as multiple people moving each other forward rather than just the two of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our new networking group, one of the things that we've been working a lot is interviews. And we worked on connecting and interviews the first time that we worked together, but this has been sort of an ongoing and evolving thing for me. And I have had some interviews while we've been working together this second time that haven't gone so well. And we've workshopped them. And I've gotten the benefit of listening to other people and how their interviews are going and preparing for their upcoming interviews, and then being able to solidify, some of that takeaway and using it in my own new interviews and new upcoming approach. And it's worked out successfully for me in that I have been able to work on the things that I still need to improve upon. I mean, it really is getting better at this, changing careers is a big shift. And so it requires a lot of attention to detail and a lot of...
The other thing, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think that the other thing that I found, and this maybe, I don't think that I had this issue with you, but I certainly had it with a few other people that were in the private group, is they would say, well, after working together for the 10 to 12 weeks of the program, they would land their first job or whatever the goal was. And I would say, well, I would love if you would continue the work and we could do the advanced networking. And they would say, but I'm good. Like I landed this gig. I'm like, no, this is about the much bigger picture. This isn't just about I landed a job. It's about how do you make sure that that job leads to the next right job, which leads to the next right job. And not only that, but in the networking group, and I didn't even foresee this, but we've actually been helping each other through the issues and the politics of being in these jobs. So for example, most recently, and I'm super, super excited to talk about this, both you and Chris Terry, and here we are, this is the third Chris on the show. So clearly there's a prerequisite that your name must be Chris if you're going to work with me. Spelled differently though.
My real name is Thomas, but I changed it to Chris.
Exactly. So I did a podcast, a case study earlier this year with Chris Terry, and I will put a link to that in the show notes if anybody wants to listen. But she was also making the transition from the reality world, very experienced doing reality shows, getting into the scripted world, and worked for months and months and months trying to break through, trying to build relationships, just didn't seem to be getting anywhere. And then all of a sudden an opportunity came up. While we were in the group, we were talking to her about how do you prep for the interview and how are you going to get ready for this? And we all discovered, and I say this with all the love in the world, I'm sure she would agree, that she just wasn't ready for this interview. So we all banded together as a team to prepare her for this interview. She ended up walking in there, knocking it out of the park, having a job 2 days later, and then coming to the next call and saying, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. I have no idea what I'm doing. And once again, we band together as a team and we find the best way to get her through it. And we've also done the same with you. And you learned a lot from her journey and applied it to yours, which leads us to the next step that I'm excited to announce, which is you now have your next job on a high profile scripted show. So let's talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. So, and a little bit of the process and how to get there. So, it really is, for lack of a better term, it's a force multiplier, being able to work on my own things that aren't going so well. Because that's what work is. You're not working on the stuff that's going great. It's not a group where we sit around and just high five. We're working on the stuff that needs improvement. And so that is, there's natural difficulty built into that, but it's so worth doing. I had an interview for a high profile show that didn't go great. So I was told afterwards, I got a call from the producer afterwards that said, oh, you are our second choice, such a close second. And the person that we hired, actually speaks the language that this show is shot in. It's not shot in English, but still they were so close to hiring me, so on and so forth. And so everything went really well, supposedly, but I still didn't get the job, and I still felt that. And I still felt like there was a lot that I could have done to assure them that I was the right person for the job, but I just wasn't coming in with a planned approach into the interview. And so that stung for a while because that show, would have really, I know I would have enjoyed it. I know I would have been good on it. I know it would have been good for me. And so we took that and we worked with, how do I turn that around? How do I do things differently? How do I come into an interview and address the elephant in the room? And how do I say, right away, hey, even though I might not have all of this on my resume, X, Y, and Z, I'm still a great fit for this because of A, B, and C, and to really focus on the things that will make me a great fit. And all of that prep went into to Chris Terry's interview as well. And then I went into my next interview that came up, and I was just ready. I was ready to talk about 5 different things. I was ready to hit the elephant in the room first. And talk about all the other reasons why I would be a great fit for the job. I had been put up by the editor. I was his recommendation. I had to meet with the producer. And I was meeting with the producer. And, right away, she hit me with the elephant. And I was ready to take down, the elephant, and did. And then, boom, it was over. She just said, okay, I'm going to send your resume to the studio, and it just needs to get approved, but everything should be fine after that. A week later, I got the call that I'd gotten the job. And so that felt really good to be able to, again, take something that was a weak point and turn it into a strength.
This is one of the areas that I love going into, is the psychology of interviews. It wasn't really something that I even thought about that much when I was putting this group together. It was more, I want to bring everybody together and we're going to work on networking techniques and it'll be fun. But then it got to the point where multiple people were on interviews. I'm like, okay, now we're going to dive into the psychology of this. And I can't go into it super, super deep, but I do kind of want to give the philosophy that I shared with both of you. And it was so amazing where, again, this idea of planting seeds and nothing happening for a while, to just see it happen to both of you the same week was just awesome. Like seriously, as soon as I got the Slack messages from both of you that you got jobs, I was like jumping up and down. It was like somebody told me like I was going to have another kid or something. So like when I tell you guys that I'm invested in your success, like I got so excited about that, and I'm still on a high because of it. But anyway, the point is that the fundamental thing that we talked about, just to give away kind of the biggest insight that we worked on, and we had to go much deeper than just the insight, but it was the fundamental paradigm shift that you don't go into a job interview saying, look at me, here's why I'm so good at what I do. This is something that I actually talked about extensively in my previous interview with the Cobra Kai creators and how I got that job. Instead, you need to ask yourself the question, what is the number one problem that this person needs to solve, and how am I the best solution to their problem? If you go into a job interview with that mindset, you will blow people away because everybody else that they meet is all about talking about themselves. Here's who I am. Here's my experience. Here's what I'm good at. Here's why I would quote unquote be a good fit. They hear that from everybody. But if you walk in there and say, I understand your problem and I'm the solution, holy cow, are they going to listen? And also when we're talking about the elephant in the room, that's the part that everybody's scared of. So for you, the elephant was?
Not enough experience.
Not enough experience. Walking into a very high profile scripted show and then looking at the piece of paper and saying, you've done reality for 10 years and I see you've done what? One other scripted show? You didn't walk in thinking, oh my God, I hope they don't see that and I hope they think I'm okay. You're like, no. I'm going to confidently go in and say, I know this is a problem, but here's why it isn't a problem. And here's why it's actually an asset to you. So how did you do that?
What I did was I talked about the experience that we had working together. I talked very specifically about how when I am working on a show that it is essentially mix ready by the time editor's cut is done, that we work super hard to make sure that the dialogue is perfectly normalized, that all of the background sounds are in, that the hard sound effects are in, that everything is there even before you would expect it. I went in saying, I can do the work and I can do it to a level that exceeds your expectations, essentially. So I set a very high expectation and understanding, really turning around the perspective. What is this producer worried about? This producer is worried that television is so fast that this assistant who doesn't have a lot of television experience won't be able to keep up. So I go right in and talk about how I'm used to working in a fast environment. My experience is a benefit. I've done this before. I know what I have to do, and I do it confidently. And that is essentially what gives her the reassurance that I am someone who will take responsibility for those parts of the process. I'm not just a good person who deserves the job only because I'm passionate about the series, which I am passionate about the series. And I took pains to explain that as well. But that I take responsibility for my job and that it will be done the best that it possibly can be done. And that if there are pieces that I haven't done before, that we will figure them out, that we will attack the workflow and get it done and make her life easier. How my entire approach to going into an interview now is demonstrating to the person who's in the position to hire, how am I going to make your life easier? This is how I'm going to make it so that you don't have to worry about what's coming out of my department. Because anybody that is looking to hire you, that's kind of the big question in the back of their minds. Is this person going to make my life easier, or is this person going to require me to stop down, change what I'm doing, slow down, and plug in the energy drain? Are they going to need, me to help them constantly? Am I going to have to do their job for them? Am I going to have to make allowances for them? Or are they going to just not have to not worry about that part of the environment? And so you really want to be on the latter side of that.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic insight. Are they going to make my life easier, or are they going to make my life harder? It is really that simple. And if I could kind of leave somebody with one final takeaway that wants a tidbit about how to nail an interview that goes even a little bit deeper than this idea of don't talk about you, talk about your understanding of their problem and how you can be their solution. What you want to think about is what is the outcome that this person desires, right? You're selling yourself. So this is no different than selling a product. So just think of yourself as a salesman. You're the product and you want to close the sale. If you can give them the outcome they want, that's all they care about. So the example that I love from the sales world is that you don't walk into a hardware store to buy a drill. You walk into a hardware store because you need a hole in the wall. The outcome is the hole in the wall or the screw or whatever the drill provides. But so many people are focused on saying, well, here are all the features that I have on my drill that are so much better. I just want a hole in the wall. Do you have all of the features that get me the hole in the wall that I desire? So if I'm a producer, or if you're an assistant that's interviewing with an editor, or you're an editor that's interviewing with a director or a showrunner, what's the outcome that they desire? And if you can understand that outcome and you can demonstrate to them why you're the best person to get that desired outcome, then it's a slam dunk. And you walk onto the interview with them saying, make sure you keep your calendar open. We want to make sure that you're available, and here are the dates that you start, and can we lock it in now? Yeah. And that's because you're not so focused on me. Here's why I'm great. Because it's not about that. It's about you solving their problem and giving them the outcome that they desire.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to be very respectful of your time. I have one final question, and obviously the whole theme here is, in general, to assist or not to assist. That is the question. And your journey was very specific in that we decided together, and you ultimately decided on your own, that going the assistant route makes the most sense. In part 2 of this podcast series, I talk with another editor that has extensive assistant work and editing work that made the opposite distinction and said, I am done assisting. The only path for me is editing. So we're going to go much deeper into that idea, looking at it from a very different perspective. But before we go to that second part of that interview, what I'd love to ask you is, if somebody were coming to you that heard this podcast, they approach you at a networking meetup, and this may actually happen, and they're like, listen, I'm at a fork in the road with my own journey. I can't figure out which direction to go. If you could give one good piece of advice to somebody where they should start, if they're stuck in the fork of the road, they don't know which way to go, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to ask themselves, why they want to do what they want to do. That will tell them, am I doing this because I want to do this? Am I doing this because somebody else thinks that I should do this? Am I doing this because it makes me happy, or because other people think it's cool, or because other people think it's prestigious? Ask yourself why you're doing something in the first place, and that will tell you which path you should take. That will tell you which direction that you need to go to be satisfied, to be fulfilled. So start by asking yourself why you're doing what you're doing. And then once you get an answer, ask yourself the question why again. And then you'll get down to the fundamentals, and that will be a compass for you that tells you what direction to go in.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself. You are never going to go wrong asking yourself the deeper why. Anybody that wants to go much deeper into the why, I will actually put a link in the show notes to a podcast interview that I did with David Mead, who's the co-author of the book Find Your Why, and is writing partners with Simon Sinek, who is essentially known as the world's foremost expert on defining and finding your why. So I'll make sure that link is in there. That's also something that I work on extensively in the coaching program when we go through that interview and go through all the various steps of that process. But unfortunately, we are out of time, and you have work and I have work, and I want to make sure we can both not get fired today, because boy, would that be a crazy end to this story. So could you let the audience know real quick if they wanted to see your work or connect with you or find you on social or your website or wherever, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, my website is chriscavanagh.net, and you can put a link to that in the show notes. And you can email me through my website. I'm happy to chat with whomever.
Awesome. Well, this has been a sincere pleasure. I wish you the best of luck as you embark on your next project. I'm very jealous that somebody else gets to work with you, and it's not me, but that's my fault. So I can't blame you for that. But I'm glad that you get to go out into the world and experience more shows and work with more people and build your own network. And that's fantastic. So it's been a pleasure working with you so far, and I'm sure that it has just begun. So thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you for listening to episode 70 of the Optimize Yourself podcast. To access the various links and resources that were mentioned in this episode, please visit optimizeyourself.me/episode 70. And as a reminder, this was only part 1. In part 2 of this case study, I chat with Wellington Harrison, who decided that his path to success no longer includes being an assistant editor. The path that makes the most sense for him is editing independent feature films. So you can learn how he and I worked together to decide that this was the right path that would lead him to his version of a fulfilling career by visiting episode number 71. And as a final reminder, if you're interested in learning more about my one-on-one career coaching and mentorship program and you would like to apply, you can visit optimizeyourself.me/elite. That's ELITE. My time slots are extremely limited, however, and I'm only going to be accepting applications through Friday, May 10th. Thank you for listening. Be well. This episode of the Optimize Yourself podcast was made possible for you by ErgoDriven, the makers of the TopoMat, my number one recommendation for anybody interested in moving more at their height-adjustable workstation. Listen, standing desks are only great if you're standing well. Otherwise, you're constantly fighting fatigue and chronic pain. Not like any other anti-fatigue mat, the Topo is scientifically proven to help you move more throughout the day, which helps reduce discomfort and also increase your focus and productivity. I'm standing on one as I read this, and I don't go to a single job without it. And if you're smaller and you're concerned that the Topo mat is too big, or you simply don't have the floor space, there's a Topo Mini for that. To learn more, visit optimizeyourself.me/topo. That's TOPO.